Mrs. Webber's Physics Adventure, Newton's Third Law of Motion. It was a lively Tuesday morning, and Mrs. Webber entered the classroom with her usual flair. She carried a coffee mug that read, "Keep calm and let Newton handle it," and a box labelled, "Top Secret Science Gizmos, 100% safe, probably." Mrs. Webber uses interactive experiments to teach her students about Newton's third law of motion, leading to chaotic balloon battles and fun discussions about real-life applications, all while keeping the atmosphere light-hearted and engaging. The class immediately perked up. "Good morning, future geniuses," Mrs. Webber said with a grin. "Today we're talking about Newton's third law of motion, or as I like to call it, physics' most dramatic law." Robbie, who always had a question, raised his hand. "Wait, dramatic, like soap opera dramatic?" "Exactly, Robbie. Newton's third law is like the drama queen of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's all about balance and a touch of sass. By the end of class, you'll be walking out of here thinking, wow, my whole life has been one big physics experiment." Mrs. Webber placed her mysterious box on the desk. "Now let's dive right in with a classic experiment. Who here likes balloons?" Every hand shot up. Perfect. Because today we're turning this classroom into a balloon battleground. Everyone gets a balloon. Your mission, blow it up and hold the end tight. But don't let go yet, or Newton's third law will come for you. The room filled with the sound of inflating balloons. Ethan was already turning red from trying to blow up his extra-large balloon, and Mia's balloon made a comical squeak as it stretched. "All right, now on the count of 3, let them go. 1, 2, 3. The room erupted into chaos as balloons shot in every direction, ricocheting off walls, desks, and unfortunate foreheads. Robbie's balloon zoomed straight into Mrs. Webber's coffee mug, knocking it over. "Newton's third law strikes again," Mrs. Webber declared, rescuing her mug. "See, the air rushes out one way and the balloon zooms the other way. Action and reaction. Also, side note, Robbie, you owe me a new coffee." "I'll add it to my tab," Robbie said sheepishly. "Now that we've survived the balloon apocalypse, let's talk about where we see Newton's third law in real life," Mrs. Webber said, brushing a stray balloon off her shoulder. "Can anyone think of an example?" "Swimming," Mia shouted. "Exactly. When you push water backward with your hands, the water pushes you forward. This is why I stick to land. Less splashing, more snacks." "Rocket launches," said Priya. "Yes, rockets are just fancy tubes that throw gas downward to launch themselves upward. Fun fact, this is also how I get out of bed in the morning. Massive effort and a lot of noise." "Trampolines," Ethan added. "Bingo. When you push down on a trampoline, it launches you upward. Unless you're me, then it's more like a slow, tragic flop back to the ground." The students laughed, and Mrs. Webber continued. "Newton's third law is everywhere. It's why a fish moves through water, why birds fly, and even why your chairs push back when you sit on them. Speaking of which, if your chair didn't push back, you'd be sitting on the floor right now. And trust me, we don't have enough band-aids for that." "Now, who's ready for the next experiment?" The students cheered. Mrs. Webber revealed 2 rolling desks. "We're going to have a little Newton's third law tug-of-war. I need 2 volunteers, 1 brave and 1 reckless." Robbie jumped up. "I'll be reckless." "And I'll be brave," Olivia said, rolling her eyes at Robbie. "All right, team," Mrs. Webber said. She placed Robbie and Olivia on the rolling desks, each holding the ends of a rope. "When I say go, pull as hard as you can. Class, what do you think will happen?" "They'll both move," shouted Ethan. "Exactly. Equal and opposite reactions. Now, Robbie, no falling off. Your parents already signed 1 accidental physics injury waiver this year." "Ready, set, pull." Robbie yanked with all his might, and Olivia was propelled toward him with equal force. Both desks collided in the middle, causing a minor pile-up. "Success," Mrs. Webber said, clapping. "The force Robbie exerted on the rope pulled Olivia, and the force Olivia exerted pulled Robbie. This is why tug-of-war tournaments should come with seatbelts." Mrs. Webber dusted off her hands. Now let's think big. How is Newton's third law being used in cutting-edge science? Space travel? Priya guessed. Absolutely. Ion thrusters are being developed for long-distance space missions. They push tiny particles backward to propel spacecraft forward. Think of it like an intergalactic sneeze. Jetpacks? Asked Mia, eyes wide. Yes, jetpacks push air downward so the wearer goes upward. If anyone here invents a functioning jetpack, I'll personally write you a glowing college recommendation letter, or at the very least, a permission slip to skip gym class. Can I use Newton's third law to avoid chores? Robbie asked. If you can figure that out, Robbie, you'll be my hero, Mrs. Webber said with a laugh. All right, class, it's quiz time, the students groaned. Oh, come on, Mrs. Webber said. It's a fun quiz. No calculators, no crying, and Robbie, no looking over Olivia's shoulder. Question 1. If you push on a wall, what happens? The wall pushes back, shouted Mia. Correct, which is why my DIY shelf project is still on the floor. Question 2. Why do rockets work in space? Because the gas pushes out and the rocket goes the other way, said Ethan. Exactly. Bonus points if you can explain this to your dog, who still doesn't understand why fetch works. Last question. If you jump off a canoe, what happens to the canoe? It drifts the other way, shouted Liam. Correct, and if Robbie's the one jumping, the canoe will probably capsize. Hey, Robbie protested. The class dissolved into laughter as Mrs. Webber clapped her hands. Well done, everyone. You've officially mastered Newton's third law of motion. Remember, it's everywhere. Walking, swimming, jumping, even in how you're sitting right now. Physics doesn't take a day off, and neither should your curiosity. As the bell rang, the students packed up, still laughing and joking about rocket-powered balloons and jetpacks. Don't forget, Mrs. Webber called after them. Newton's third law is the ultimate comeback. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Use it wisely, especially when dealing with siblings. And with that, she turned back to her desk, already planning next week's lesson on gravity and how to make it hilariously unforgettable.